This is a fun new drawing tablet. This is the XP Pen Artist Pro 19. It's big, but it's not too big, and it looks great. It's fun to draw on, so let's check it out. Hello, my name is Brad, and this drawing tablet is a good size. It's 19 inches. This is from XP Pen, and it follows in the tradition of many of their drawing tablets that they've released over the last 2 years or so. 19 inches is a pretty good size. I really like these 16-inch tablets. That's what works best in my setup back there. 16 inches is light enough where I can move it around my desk, move it out of the way when I'm not using it. And oftentimes if you go bigger than that, when you get up to like 21 or 24 inches, those get big, those get bulky, those are really anchored to your desk. It's not that you can't move them, it's just a lot bulkier to move them. This 19-inch tablet kind of fits in between. It's kind of the lightweightness of a 16-inch tablet, so you can move it around, but it gives you more drawing real estate, and I think that's going to work well for a lot of people. Now, this isn't the first time a tablet maker has gone bigger than that standard 16-inch size that we've seen for years. For example, Wacom with their Cintiq Pro is going a little bit bigger. They've moved up to 17 inches, and Huion released their own 19-inch 4K touch display just earlier this year. Spec-wise, this is very, very similar to what Huion released. The main difference being is that Huion has a touchscreen and this one does not. Now that could be a good or a bad thing. If you need a touchscreen, this doesn't have it. But if you want to save a little bit of money and not get a feature that you're not going to use, if you don't need that touchscreen, this is a really welcome addition. Over on my website, I rank all the tablets I review, and I also link to the reviews and that sort of thing, and I'm not sure where to rank this. Do I put the Huion higher or this higher? They're really tied. So let's start off by taking a look at what comes in the box. At the very top, we have the tablet itself. The design is very similar to the Gen 2 tablets that XP Pen has been releasing over the last few years. While on the back, you have some VESA mount holes. You also have these fold-out feet, which set it up at a really nice drawing angle. I really like having this option. Once you put a stand on a computer, that can be bulky, makes it a little bit harder to move around, but just having some nice feet back there makes it really easy to just fold back and slide out of the way. Of course, you could always add a stand using the mounting holes back there. Now, this device has relatively small bezels, and this is a trend I've seen in a lot of drawing tablets over the last few years. They're leaving just enough there so that your hand doesn't slide off the edge when you're drawing. Also in the box is a color calibration sheet. That is something that a lot of tablet manufacturers are pushing with their pro-level products, and this one is no different. Before it leaves the factory, they're actually going in and color calibrating it for you and trying to get those colors looking good. And in this case, they succeeded really well. Right out of the box, it does look really good. We also have this thing. This is XP Pen's new pen holder, and it's pretty cool. XP Pen has been doing a good job with their pen holders for a while now. They've included two pens. They have kind of a standard Wacom-like pen that's wider, and then they have a thinner pen, so you can use the one you find most comfortable. There are also some replacement nibs. There's some thinner nibs. There's like a textured white nib that gives you a little bit more grip on the screen. They're also taking a page out of Wacom's book and including this little cover thing, so you can pop out the button cover if you don't like buttons on your pen and put this little plastic thing there instead. They include one of these for the smaller pen, but not for the larger pen. The larger pen has a new feature. It's got a little scroll wheel on. I'll talk about that more in a minute. Now, this tablet doesn't have any face buttons. This has been the trend for drawing tablets. Instead, what they're including in the box is this little shortcut remote. It's a little lightweight thing. It's nothing too fancy. It doesn't feel like super premium or anything, but it totally gets the job done. It's totally customizable. It's got a scroll wheel on it, so you can use that scroll wheel to either change your brush size, zoom in and out, or pan. It's customizable, so you can do whatever you really want with it. This also comes with the power adapters that you will need. It's kind of interesting that this also, for me at least, came with some of the international power adapters. I'll never need to use them, but it's nice to know that they're there. And of course, it also comes with all the cables that you're going to need to connect this. There's two ways to connect this. One, you can use a single USB Type-C cable and just connect the entire 19-inch display to your computer and run it that way, if you have the proper port for it. There's also a second cable, so if your computer doesn't draw enough power to power this thing, you can also plug it into the wall and use it that way as well. There's also a third option in which you connect this, which includes an HDMI/USB Type-A splitter cable. So basically, they're including all the cables that you're going to need to connect this to your computer, no matter what your setup might be. Then we have this little box, which has the manual, some of the legal information, a bunch of extra nibs, even more nibs than were already in the pen holder. We also have a cleaning cloth and a drawing glove. What? Why is everybody looking at me like that? Today I am drawing a scene from my comic. I started this particular panel by creating a background in Blender. That's how I've been working a lot lately. So instead of sketching out my perspective and that sort of thing in pencil, that Blender image becomes the background that I'm using. That also lets me reposition that background for other panels if I want to draw the same scene from other like angles and viewpoints. One of these days I am going to make a video where I describe how I do that. I just haven't had time yet. That, and I'm also trying to figure out my workflow. Although over on my website, bradsartschool.com, I do have some other tutorials, some other courses that you can check out. One is Intro to Digital Art. So many of the coloring techniques and things that I'm doing with ink and line work, I cover in that course. Or if you're just getting into drawing and you want to learn all of the basics, I have a Learn to Draw in 60 Days, which every day there's a new lesson. It's exactly what it sounds like, but if you'd like to learn more about either of those courses, check out my website down below. Now, what are the specs on this device? Well, it all starts with that 19-inch screen. Technically, this is an 18.4-inch display quarter to corner. Now this thing is full 4K. We're talking 3,840 pixels by 2,160 pixels. It's a fully laminated display, so there's no gap between the glass and the screen below it. So you're also not getting the same pen displacement you might get on an older drawing tablet. Your pen nib really matches up well with the cursor below it. This thing also has an anti-glare coating on it. They're calling it like a nano glass etched coating. And these coatings have been getting smoother and smoother and smoother, and it's no different here. It does give you a little bit of drawing resistance, which is kind of nice. It also keeps the light off it because oftentimes with a drawing tablet, since it's sitting flat and not in front of you, you get a lot more light glare, especially if you have light directly above your tablet. So even though the trend seems to be moving away from that rougher grip surface, I really miss those rougher grip surfaces. I think that's part of the reason a lot of these manufacturers have started including different nibs in their like pen holders. These little white nibs or gray nibs give you a little bit more texture that gives it a little bit more of a grippy feel when you're drawing with it. So it kind of compensates there. It feels pretty good. Now this is their Pro line, so their color profiles are something that they're really pushing here. We have a 99.8% sRGB, a 96% Adobe RGB, and a 98% P3 rating. This also has a 1,000:1 contrast ratio and overall has really good viewing angles, something that you find on these nicer, higher end screens. Now, in terms of hot spots, like where does this thing get warm when you're using it, something that happens a lot on drawing tablets, I find it gets hot along the top, but my hand is never actually resting along the top. Usually when I'm drawing, I'm in the middle of the screen, right? So my palm is never resting along the top, so I'm okay with that. It never really got in the way. I had to go searching for that hotspot. So next up, let's go over to the tablet because it's time to do some drawing tests. So to start off, let's take a look at the two pens that this thing comes with. I'm going to use kind of our standard pen first. Now, one of the things I really like about this pen is, yes, you have the standard buttons that you always have with these kind of pens, but you also have this little rolly thing. And I have set that to zoom here so I can zoom out and zoom in right from my pen. Let me draw some lines so that's easier to see when I zoom in and out. Here we go, zoom in, zoom out. Really nice. You can also set that to do things like brush size or that sort of thing as well. It's got a nice, comfortable rubber grip. It tapers out. I really like the size of these pens. Even though the thin pen is nice as well, it's something you can get used to pretty easily. So let's take a look at what happens when we draw with the pen. I'm going to start off really light, and I'm going to add more pressure as we go. And I'm just going to vary the pressure to see how that pressure curve performs. And I think the pressure curve does exactly what I'd expect it to. XP Pen has been using their X3 technology in these pens for several years now, and it all behaves about the same way. When I do fast hatch lines, I get some really good taper to those lines. I get some really nice feel to them. When I start going faster, I can see a little bit of shoestringing at the end, but nothing that I can't handle. You know, when I'm looking at some of the lines that I was drawing, I was getting, this might be hard to see. Let's see if I can kind of zoom in here. I get a little bit of wave to this pen, which is sometimes something that happens when you draw slow angled lines, but also sometimes when you're going around corners or curves, you'll see a little bit of bending, especially when you like slow things down. Now, if I add a little bit of smoothing in Photoshop, because I had my smoothing turned off, at 16%, I find the smoothing really cleans up. So let's do some angled lines and let's take a look at what we're getting there, because I feel like this is doing really well in terms of like some of the things I've seen from Wacom competitors in recent years. It is a hot August day, so I am going to use my drawing glove because my hand is kind of sticking to the screen a little bit. So let's go ahead and we will draw our slow angled line. And I'm getting a little bit of wobble. Oops, my smoothing's still on there. Let's turn that off. There we go. So if I go smooth and slow, it's actually really good. I mean, I see a little bit of mechanical wobble there, but nothing too crazy. That was my hand wobbling there. When you draw with it, it's one of those things that you can tell the difference, but it's probably a little harder to tell at home. I'll press a little harder and try it again. So overall, I think, yes, there is some little bit of mechanical wobble here, but it's really good. It is so close to what I see with a Wacom pen. The other thing that this pen does extraordinarily well is initial activation rate. So if I just very gently draw on this thing, my line is super small. And what's cool is if you're a light sketcher, you're still going to get a great range of pressure from this thing. Like, I am barely pressing at all. I don't know if you could even see that line, and it's still giving me a line. The initial activation rate on these XP Pen tablets is really good. And it doesn't matter if you use the thin pen or the thick pen, they're basically doing the same thing. That's a really light line. I'll add a bit more pressure, kind of my standard line drawing, my thickest line. It's doing the same thing. Let's do the slow angled line here. And it looks really good. I'm really happy with how this is performing. This is fantastic. Now, while we're here, I did want to show off the settings. This has been redesigned since I last saw it. It's less flashy. There's this drop down here where right now it's set on a shortcut remote, or I can change some things on the tablet itself. But on the shortcut remote, you just come in here, you tap on a key that you want to change. I have one of the major keys set to undo because I do a lot of undoing with my lines. There's also different setups, so you can come into here and set up these 4 different profiles, and you can toggle on the profile or off the profile. And you can also come up here and add a new profile per application. So if I wanted something specific for Adobe Animate or Adobe Illustrator, I could totally do that from here. Program by program shortcuts. Let's drop this down and go to the tablet itself. And this is all the stuff we're used to seeing on a tablet. We have our calibration. So I have my like little corners and I could tap on the corners. I don't want to do that. I'm going to escape out of this. I could set my work area. I can even change my display settings like my brightness and that sort of thing. I can also come in here with my pen settings. Now I mentioned there's 2 pens and there's a drop down over here. So I can have one set of pressure for this slim pen, and I could have, say, a different set of pressure for that other pen, which is really nice. So if you want 2 different drawing styles because you have 2 different pens, you could set these independently. You also have 16,000 levels of pressure. That's a little bit overkill, but you could see how much pressure do I have to apply to get that, and it's going to give you this pressure gauge. So my initial activation rate, let's see if we can get it down to like, I don't know, this is really, really light. It's really hard to get it below like 300. But you can set all that up in there, and then there's some other settings in here as well. That is the pen test, and those are some of the settings that you're going to find for this tablet. This tablet was exactly what I expected. I reviewed 2 other Gen 2 XP Pen tablets last year. I believe it was the 14 and the 16, and they were great upgrades over the last version. This is the same exact thing, but it's at a larger size with a couple extra features packed into the pens. We've kind of hit this level of maturity for drawing tablets, so I'm not surprised at all that this is what XP Pen has produced here. Since it is 19 inches, it's right at that size where you have to start thinking about your desk setup and if it's big enough for what you're doing. For example, I've got a tray that my monitor's on. It's a little bit wider. This doesn't quite fit on my desk. It overlaps a little bit, so a 16-inch still works best for me. If I was using it in a more open space, like my testing area, there's plenty of space over there. So this is all to say that even though it's move-aroundable, kind of like the 16s that I like to use, you do kind of have to have the space for it still, because you're getting a bit larger. Unlike a 16, where a 16 makes a nice second display, once you get up to this size, 19 inches, if you got a stand for it, this would make a great primary monitor if it was the only thing you had, where you set it up as a monitor while you're doing one task and pulling it down to draw on if you're doing another task. The big question here is Is this a Wacom replacement? I feel like it is. It's going to get you like 95% of the way there. If we're looking at the pen, apples to apples here, the Wacom pen is still better. There's that tiny bit of wave here, but man, is it really subtle. This is something that XP Pen has really improved with this Gen 2 variation of their Pro tablets. If you've never used a Wacom tablet, you're not going to notice the difference. Even if you are coming from a Wacom tablet, unless you're doing a ton of line art, you might not notice the difference. And from a price standpoint, it makes a lot more sense for most artists than a Wacom tablet. There's also that Huion display. Is it better? Honestly, I think they're really tied. It comes down to whether you need that touch screen or whether you don't need it. If you don't need it, but you want the 19 inches, go with this one. If you really want that touch screen, go with the Huion. But what do you guys think? Let me know down below in the comments. And don't forget to check out bradsartschool.com. That's all I got this week. I'll talk to you guys in a couple of days.